"What is the use of a book without pictures or conversations?" asked Alice. "What is the use of a book without pictures or conversations?" asks Alice, disgustedly, just before taking her departure from Wonderland, where she finds no lack of animated discourse. This book, like its predecessors in the series, is conversational in form and has as many pictures as the subject matter calls for. All boys and some girls, as well as their elders, take more or less interest in the marvels of chemistry. To give an elementary but useful knowledge of these marvels, chiefly by means of simple experiments clearly described by the writer and easily performed at home by any wide-awake young reader, is the object of the following talks by Uncle Paul. The personal biographical interest of the book is not to be overlooked. The boys Jules and Emile are the author's own children, faithfully portrayed even to the names they bear. In his captivating fashion, the man of vast learning makes himself at once teacher and comrade to his young hearers, and we learn that his chemistry lessons especially had a great success. With apparatus of his own devising, and of the simplest kind, he could perform a host of elementary experiments. The apparatus, as a rule, consisting of the most ordinary materials, such as a common flask or bottle, an old mustard pot, a tumbler, a goose quill, or a pipe stem. A series of astonishing phenomena amazed their wondering eyes. He made them see, touch, taste, handle, and smell, and always the hand assisted the word. Always. The example accompanied the precept. For no more fully valued the profound maxim, so neglected and misunderstood. For no one fully valued the profound maxim, so neglected and misunderstood, that to see is to know. Though living creatures necessarily claimed the naturalist's first affections, he nonetheless animates even the simple elementary bodies, celebrating the marvelous activities of the air, the violence of chlorine, the metamorphosis of carbon, the miraculous bridals of phosphorus, and the splendors which accompany the birth of a drop of water. Concerning the eager young pupils, Jules and Emile, by this time well known to all readers of the series, a still further word may not be out of place. Emile the younger, the giddy pate of the narrative, impulsive and full of boyish curiosity and vigorous young life, is drawn for us with fidelity and a delightful touch of humor by the loving father. Jules is shown to us more sedate and gifted with finer qualities, and with his grief-stricken parent we mourn his early death. He was a youth of great promise, all fire, all flame, of a serious nature, an exquisite being, of a precocious intelligence, whose rare aptitudes both for science and literature were truly extraordinary. Such too was the subtlety of his senses, that by handling no matter what plant, which with his eyes closed he could recognize and define it merely by the sense of touch. This delightful companion of his father's studies had scarcely passed his 15th year when death removed him. A terrible void was left in his heart, which was never filled. 30 years later, the least allusion to this child, however tactful, which recalled this dear memory to his mind, would wring his heart, and his whole body would be shaken by his sobs. In a memorial foreword to the second volume of his Souvenirs entomologiques, the bereaved father pays loving tribute to this lost son and fellow worker. Thus it is that the following chapters will be found to have a human and personal appeal to supplement their scientific interest. May they yield both pleasure and profit to their readers. Uncle Paul is a man of some learning who waters his lettuce plants and weeds with Uncle Paul is a man of some learning who waters his lettuce plants and weeds his cabbages and turnips in the quiet of a humble little village. Staying with him are his nephews, Emile and Jules, young scholars already grappling with the intricacies of the rule of three and the pitfalls of the past participle, and both of them very eager to learn. Jules, the elder, is even now beginning to suspect that school will not have taught him everything when he has mastered his grammar and arithmetic. Their uncle does his best to encourage the boy's desire for knowledge, convinced as he is that in the stern battle of life our best weapon is a trained intellect. Convinced as he is that in the stern battle of life our best weapon is a convinced as he is that in the stern battle of life, our best weapon is a trained intellect. For some time past, his family had noticed in him an unusual preoccupation. There was ripening in his mind a plan for teaching his nephews the rudiments of chemistry, that science so fruitful in its practical application. What are these dear children going to be someday? He asked himself. Will they be manufacturers, artisans, mechanics, farm laborers, or what? Who knows? One thing at any rate is certain, and that is, whatever direction their activity takes, it will be to their advantage to be able to give an account of the things they have accomplished. A little science is something that they must have. I should like my nephew to know what air is and water, why we breathe and why wood burns, the nutritive elements essential to plant life and the constituents of the soil. And it is no vague and imperfect knowledge from hearsay. I would have them gain of these fundamental truths on which depend agriculture and the industrial arts and our health itself. I would have them know these things thoroughly from their own observation and experience. Books here are insufficient and can serve merely as aids to scientific experiment. But how shall we manage it? In this wise did Uncle Paul ponder over his project, a project involving grave difficulties such as the want of a laboratory and of all those ingenious devices without which it would at first seem impossible to undertake any serious experiments in chemistry. The only appliances at hand being the commonest of household utensils, bottles and phials. Jars and pitchers, plates and cups and earthen bowls, drinking glasses and old mustard pots. It is true the distance to town was not great for special occasions, but within the very modest limits set by an imperative economy, a few drugs and glass implements might be bought. 10 francs must be made to cover these extraordinary purchases. How, then, to impart some useful knowledge of chemistry with the help of little more than such simple appliances as the village could furnish? That was the problem. But in the end, it came about that one day Uncle But in the end, it came about that one day Uncle Paul announced to his nephews that he proposed to enliven the monotony of their regular studies by introducing a little diversion without using the word chemistry, which would have meant nothing to them. He spoke of certain interesting things he had to show them, of various wonderful experiments to be performed, lively and curious as are all children. Emile and Jules greeted this announcement with enthusiasm. When shall we begin? They asked. Tomorrow, today. Very soon. Give me 5 minutes for my preparations. No sooner said than done. Uncle Paul went to his neighbor and the locksmith, and from among the files on the artisan's workbench selected something and wrapped it up in a piece of paper. Then he visited the apothecary and for a few cents bought a drug, which he also wrapped in a bit of old newspaper, after which he returned home with his 2 packages. What is this? He asked, opening one of the parcels before the children. It is a yellow powder that makes a little crackling sound when you rub it between your fingers, replied Emile. I think it must be sulfur. And I, added Jules, I am sure it is sulfur, but we'll soon see. So saying, he took a pinch of the yellow powder and dropped it on some live coals from the kitchen fire, whereupon it began to burn with a blue flame and the suffocating odor of a sulfur match. That proves it, I hope, cried the lad, much pleased with himself at having found a quick way to demonstrate the nature of the substance offered by his uncle. It is sulfur, and nothing else, for what is the only thing that burns with that blue flame and that smell that makes you cough? For that is the only thing. It is sulfur and nothing else. For that is the only thing that burns with the blue flame. And that smell that makes you cough. Yes, my boys, assented their uncle. It is sulfur, powdered very fine and called flowers of sulfur. And now what is this? He opened the second package and displayed its contents, consisting of a powdered metal, the fact of its being a metal showing clearly in its glittering particles. That looks very much like iron fillings, declared the younger of the two observers. It does more than look like them. It does more than look like them, asserted the other. It really is iron fillings. Uncle Paul, you must have got them from the locksmiths. Locksmiths. Though I must congratulate Jules on his cleverness and quickness, rejoined Uncle Paul. I ought at the same time to warn him against jumping to conclusions. In the studies we are about to take up together, it is best to exercise careful scrutiny before venturing on any assertions, as otherwise one would run the risk of making frequent mistakes. You say these metallic particles are iron fillings, but lead fillings, tin fillings, zinc fillings, iron fillings, all are of very much the same appearance, being all light in color and having a bright luster. You declared the yellow powder to be sulfur after you had proved it by dropping a pinch on burning coals. Now find an equally decisive proof that these filings are of iron. The boys put on their thinking caps and looked at each other in mutual questioning, but no happy thought came at their bidding. To what test could they put those filings to prove that they were indeed of iron? It was a puzzling problem, that was certain, but at last Uncle Paul started the boys on the right track. How about the magnet, said he, that horseshoe-shaped piece of iron bought by Jules at the last fair and added to his little cabinet of apparatus for making experiments in physics. Wouldn't it be just a thing to help you out in this present perplexity? Many a time I've seen you amusing yourselves with that magnet by making it draw to itself bits of iron, nails, needles. Does it have the same effect on lead? No, replied Jules. I have never been able to make it take up the least bit of lead. Though it will lift much heavier weights of iron, a key, for example. Does it attract tin? No more than lead. And zinc and copper, does it have any effect on them? No more than on lead and tin. Ah, now I have it. The magnet attracts only iron. That's the test we're after. Now, we'll see. Thereupon, Jules ran upstairs 2 steps at a time and hastened to his cupboard, where on a pine shelf were arranged his books and his little pieces of apparatus, simple appliances and mostly of his own make. Eagerly catching up his magnet, he ran downstairs and brought it almost in contact with the filings. Immediately there were clusters of them clinging to the 2 ends of the magnet, forming long beards of bristling appearance. See there, cried the lad, how it makes the filings come to it. I am sure now they are iron, nothing but iron. Yes, my boy, they are iron, assented his uncle, and it was the locksmith's workbench that furnished me with the filings. Now, with this iron and this sulfur, which we have just proved to be iron and sulfur beyond any doubt, we will enter upon our study of chemistry. Give your attention to what I am about to do. So saying, he emptied on a large sheet of paper both the flowers of sulfur and the iron fillings, after which he mixed them thoroughly together by shaking the paper like a sieve and stirring its contents with his fingers. Look now, said he, what have we on the paper? Oh, that's easy enough, Jules made answer. It's just a mixture of sulfur and iron fillings. Yes, a mixture, and could you tell which one substance from the other? Yes, a mixture. And could you still tell the one substance from the other, all mixed together as they are? Nothing easier, answered Emile, examining closely what was on the paper. Here, for instance, are some grains of sulfur. I know them by their yellow color. And here are some of the iron fillings, as you can tell by their shiny look. And would you undertake to separate the particles of one kind from those of the other, to sort them out? Why not, if it really had to be done? I have good eyes, and with the help of a pin I could gather all the sulfur together on one side and all the iron on the other. Only I doubt whether my patience would hold out to the end. Yes, it certainly would be a rather longer job than picking over a plate of beans, and Emile's patience, however great it may be, would be hardly equal to the task. Still, the thing is not impossible. In that little heap, which has now neither the yellow color of pure sulfur, nor the lustrous gray of pure iron, but which has at once something of the two colors, and is consistently of a greenish appearance. In that little heap of matter, I say, an eye of sufficient patience and a hand of sufficient dexterity could, between them, see and separate what is sulfur from the iron. But there are other ways of making the separation. Who will find one? Come, now set your wits to work. I have it! I have it, cried Jules, passing the ends or poles of his magnet back and forth through the mixture. Just what I was going to propose, said Emile, if Jules had given me a moment to think about it. Now that Uncle has reminded us of the magnet, the rest comes of itself. Now that Uncle has reminded us of the magnet, the rest comes of itself. To hit on the way out of a difficulty after a moment's reflection is all very well, my young friend, rejoined his uncle, but to hit on it immediately is still better. However, you will get even with Jules very soon, I am sure. Now let us see how his method of sorting the two substances succeeds. Jules went on passing his magnet through the mixture of iron filings and sulfur, with the result that the metallic particles were attracted to the two poles of the magnet and clung to them, while the sulfur was left behind. Again and again the magnet was plunged into the heap, and each time it was withdrawn loaded at its two extremities with long and thick beards of filings, which the young operators detached with his fingertips and placed at one side. Not a particle of the sulfur clung to the magnet, or at least not by the force of attraction, the magnet exerting no such force on sulfur. And if any scattering particles were found among the iron fillings, set aside by themselves, it was simply because they had become enmeshed among the grains of metal. A second similar sorting very easily separated them. That's the way to do it, exclaimed Jules, delighted with the success of his operations. That's the way, see? The magnet comes out each time loaded with filings. The magnet comes out each time loaded with fillings. And the sulfur is left behind. If I went on, it wouldn't take me more than 10 minutes to separate all the iron on the paper from the sulfur. If I went on, it wouldn't take me more than 10 minutes to separate all the iron on the paper from the sulfur. It is unnecessary to continue, my dear child, said Uncle Paul. Your method is perfect, being both expeditious and unfailing in its results. Now, put the iron filings back with the sulfur and mix the two well together. Your magnet, so serviceable to us in this process of sorting the two substances, is not at the disposal of everyone. Wouldn't it be possible to get along without it, to make the desired separation in some other way? It is well, it is even indispensable, especially for us with our meager outfit. To learn how to do without what we do not possess, and nevertheless to attain results. Let us then dispense with our magnet and find some other way to separate the iron fillings and the sulfur. Think a moment, I will help you. Which is the heavier of the two substances, the sulfur or the iron? The iron, replied the two young chemists. And what would the iron do if we threw it into the water? It would sink to the bottom. And the sulfur, what would that do? I mean finely powdered sulfur, flowers of sulfur, not sulfur in the lump, for that too would sink in water. I see. Emil made haste to answer, lest he should again be outstripped in this race of wits by his elder brother. I see. I will throw the whole mixture into a glass of water and the iron will sink to the bottom, but the sulfur, wait a minute, the sulfur. Hush, Jules, cautioned his uncle, as the lad showed signs of breaking in. Let your brother finish. The sulfur, repeated Emil, his cheeks flushed with animation, will stay on the surface, or perhaps it will sink, but not so fast as the iron, which is much heavier. Let's try it. I was confident, my good Emil, said his uncle approvingly, that you would soon get even with Jules. Yes, your idea is excellent, and if you hesitate a little in putting it into words, that is only because you are in some doubt as to how the sulfur will behave. I will put the thing to the test for you. Uncle Paul thereupon took a large glass and filled it with water, into which he dropped a handful of the mixture, stirring the liquid at the same time with a small wooden stick. Having thus started a brisk movement in the glass, he paused and awaited results. Very soon the iron fillings, because of their weight, had settled to the bottom, while the flowers of sulfur continued to circle about in the liquid. This liquid was next poured off into another glass, and when it came to rest, the sulfur held in suspension gradually settled. Thus the two substances were collected, each by itself, the iron in the first glass and the sulfur in the second. You see, my young friend, said Uncle Paul, it is accomplished quite as expeditiously as with the magnet, and the process calls for nothing that any one would not have at hand. Let us learn, I repeat, to do without what we lack and still to attain the end in view. It would be easy, you understand, for us to separate the two substances in the whole mixture by treating it a handful at a time in the manner just shown to you, but that is quite unnecessary for my present purpose. Let us sum up briefly what we have just learned. Two or more substances of different kinds form a mixture when their union does not prevent their being separated by the simple process of sorting, effected in one way or another. The heap there before you is a mixture of sulfur and iron, and these can be separated either with the help of a magnet or with water, or given sufficient time and patience, a grain at a time, by hand. So much for that. Now let us pass on to something else. So saying, he put the mixture of iron fillings and sulfur into a bowl, added a little water, and kneaded the mass with his fingers until it formed a thick paste. Then he took a bottle of clear glass, an old discarded bottle that had once contained some sort of syrup or medicine, and filled it with the paste. Finally, in order to heat the mass somewhat, the bottle, thus filled, was set in the sun, and as it was a summer day, the result proposed by Uncle Paul was not long in being attained, thanks to the temperature. Thanks to the temperature. Now pay close attention, he admonished his pupils, and you will see something curious. The boys were all eyes, all attention, in their eagerness to lose nothing of this, their first experiment in chemistry. What was going to happen in the bottle? They did not have very long to wait. A quarter of an hour had not passed before something remarkable took place. The contents of the bottle, at first greenish in color from the yellow of the sulfur and the gray of the iron, began gradually to turn black and present the appearance of soot, while at the same time jets of vapor accompanied by hissing sounds escaped from the mouth of the bottle, and small quantities of the black substance were ejected as if by the force of an explosion. Jules, said his uncle, take the bottle in your hand a moment, and no matter what happens, don't lose your hold. Unsuspectingly, the boy approached and grasped the bottle firmly in his hand. Oh, wow, he cried, with a start of pain and surprise. It's hot, hot! And all his self-control was needed to prevent his dropping the burning bottle. Replacing it on the ground more quickly than he had taken it up, he turned to his uncle, shaking his fingers like one who had inadvertently touched hot iron. How it scorches, uncle! He continued. You can't hold it more than a second, it's so hot. If the bottle had been over a fire, I should have expected to find it hot, but there is no fire here to heat it. And yet it gets hot, like that, all by itself. Who would have thought it? Emil in his turn had to handle the wonderful bottle that is of its own accord. Emil in his turn had to handle the wonderful bottle that of its own accord grew so hot as almost to burn anyone touching it. First feeling of it cautiously with his fingertips, then grasping it boldly in his hand, he set it down again not less quickly than Jules had done, while his looks showed the profound astonishment, the utter bewilderment caused by this generation of heat from no apparent source. Water was poured in a mixture of iron fillings and sulfur, said he to himself. It was all wet with water, which is not exactly the right sort of fuel for a fire, and then the whole was set in the sunshine, which isn't what you would call hot, and pretty soon, for no reason that I can see, the mixture grew scorching hot. I can't understand it. Ah, my little lad, Uncle Paul's chemical experiments will give you many another surprise before they are finished. He who enters on the study of chemistry finds himself transported to a new world where marvel follows marvel in endless succession.